Hello, I'm Inash Levinsky and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Sergei Lavrov, the Kremlin's old war horse of diplomacy, has once again neighed in the direction of Europe. This time, he has decided to place Napoleon, Hitler, and Emmanuel Macron in the same category of villains supposedly conspiring against poor, innocent Russia. Yes, because in the alternate reality of the Kremlin, any European leader who dares to stand up to Russian aggression is just another tyrant plotting Moscow's downfall. Or maybe it's just that Putin and his cronies have become so accustomed to Europe bowing down that the mere thought of defiance feels like an existential threat. With the patience of a man who has repeated the same lie 1,000 times, Lavrov declared that any EU military presence in Ukraine would mean direct war against Russia. Because, in his mind, Ukraine isn't a sovereign country. It's merely an extension of Russian territory that, for some inconvenient reason, refuses to acknowledge Moscow's divine right to rule over it. And Macron, who dares to mention nuclear deterrence now, that, of course, is a direct threat to Russia. Unlike Putin, who threatens nuclear war every other day, that's just Moscow's peaceful way of reminding the world that Russia fears nothing and that anyone who resists will be greeted with a mushroom cloud.
В отличие от своих предшественников, которые тоже хотели против России воевать, Наполеона, Гитлера, господин Макрон не очень изящно поступает, потому что те прямо говорили, надо завоевать Россию, надо Россию победить. А он, видимо, хочет того же самого, но почему-то говорит, что воевать с Россией надо, чтобы она не победила Францию, что Россия создает угрозы Франции и Европе.
But the real comedic highlight, Lavrov's brilliant diplomatic advice. Macron should simply call Putin, and everything will be fine. Just like last time when Putin looked Macron straight in the eye and swore he had no plans to invade Ukraine, mere weeks before rolling tanks across the border. Because as history has shown, every conversation with Moscow ends the same way. Russia promises peace and then Russian troops march in and start slaughtering civilians. It's been done before. Now, for years, Russian propaganda has followed a simple formula. If someone stands up to Moscow, they are the new Hitler. And if someone tries to stop Russia from carving up Europe, they are the ones provoking a war. This is how Kremlin logic works. The more Russia attacks, the louder it screams that it's the real victim. And don't be surprised if, a few years from now, Russian school children are taught that Macron was just another Napoleon, dreaming of marching on Moscow. After all, Russian history has always been rewritten to suit the Kremlin's needs, so why stop now? Now, just yesterday, Trump's man of choice for resolving the Russia-Ukraine war, who, by the way, seems to have been a bit sidelined recently, revealed Washington's idea for Moscow. And would you believe it? It is a reset. Okay, record scratch, freeze frame. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how we got here. Well, sure we do, because Trump following Barack Obama on Russia is not what we had on our bingo cards. What Keith Kellogg said is this: the need to reset relations with Russia to secure Americans' vital national interests and ultimately to stop US entanglement in an endless proxy war are the real driving reasons why President Trump's approach and the framing of this war is distinct from the broader conventional approach that we see publicly to the war. End of quote. And there it is. Reset. And look, I hate to rain on your parade, but again, it's been done before. Remember this picture? Yes, this is Hillary Clinton, who Trump commonly referred to as Crooked Hillary, and the totally not crooked Sergei Lavrov playing with a reset button. This was Obama's approach, and fun fact, apparently the word reset was mistranslated into Russian as overcharge. And believe it or not, this was only a foreshadowing of things to come. You know, like Russia attacking Ukraine in 2014? And now, Trump wants to emulate Obama. They did have that friendly chat at Jimmy Carter's funeral after all, so maybe there was something to it. Also, General Kellogg gets many things abominably wrong in his series of statements, unfortunately. Even the statement that we already mentioned, proxy war? That's usually the telltale term used by online vatniks and tankies, i.e. Russia understanders of all walks of life, to discredit America's support for Kiev. And now that is official, I guess? Also, this would mean that a proxy war we're seeing now is being waged perhaps by North Korea against the US? Yeah, we're on a slippery slope here, very much so. Also, there is other stuff, like pausing Ukraine aid was, and I quote, sort of like hitting a mule with a 2x4 across the nose to get Zelensky's attention. You know what else it got, apart from Zelensky's attention? It got people killed on the front line, civilians too. Because the Russians, they don't mess around with 2x4s, they go straight for the Shahed drones, and they keep doing that every single day. Now, to Kellogg's credit, he at least admitted sanctions against Russia fell short on the enforcement side, and that the Istanbul Protocol will not be the basis for talks, as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said before that. Well, great, before the Istanbul Protocol was trash, especially for Ukraine. However, the spirit of the thing apparently is still up in the air. Forcing Ukraine into a peace deal, extorting concessions in order to try the reverse Nixon maneuver on Russia and China. Bad vibes, man. Oh, and here is a cherry on top. Watch this.
Sir, you talked about carrots and sticks, but what are the sticks we're trying to apply on Moscow to get Russia to become more accommodating? Because right now it does look like we're leaning pressure really on the Ukrainians, but not on the Russians. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. Okay, and I'd challenge you with this. It's a question with a binary answer. Do we have a term sheet from the Russians, broadly? And do we have a term sheet from the Ukrainians? The answer is yes and no. Steve Witkoff went to Moscow, was able to talk with Putin for 3 hours. There was a call that was made between President Putin and President Trump. And we offered, when you talk about the pressures, the fact is, when the Ukrainians came last week, they had an invitation to sign a document in the Oval Office. They came to Washington, D.C., had that invite, and frankly, walked out of here with nothing. So I challenge your notion about who's being more reasonable right now, because when you look at what is happening, I don't see it the same way. I think that we're going to get there. I think the options are to apply more pressures. I think that's good. I don't think it's been done, but I think the opportunity is there to do it, and that's going to be up to the President of the United States.
See? Russia is reasonable now. How reasonable? 137,000 war crimes in Ukraine based on 2024 data, Bucha, Irpin, Mariupol, prisoner executions, blowing up a river dam, messing around with a nuclear power plant, and crashing a drone into the Chernobyl disaster containment shelter. Yeah, very reasonable. Also, Zelensky didn't wear a suit. Well, he didn't. But you're the one swinging that 2x4 at Ukraine while wearing your Armani. Just saying. The Kremlin has cooked up a real spectacle this time. According to one of those ever-optimistic pundits, Slovakian MEP Eric Kalinak, once Russia captures Kiev, it will magically transform into the most reliable neighbor Slovakia could ever wish for. As if annexing an entire sovereign nation automatically turns you into the paragon of trustworthiness. And wait for it, an MEP from Robert Fico's party agrees, insisting that Russians are far more dependable partners than those pesky, democratically elected Ukrainians. How delightfully twisted, huh? Then we have Slovakian President Peter Pellegrini, who expects Ukraine to restore gas transit as a gesture of gratitude. One might imagine that Ukraine would welcome such a proposal with open arms, if only it weren't busy defending its very existence from imperial aggression. In this topsy-turvy world where Russian imperialism is dressed up as a public service and theft is rebranded as generosity, the Kremlin's propaganda machine churns out these absurdities with a straight face. Capture Kiev, become a model neighbor, and enjoy the perks of cheap gas while your adversaries protest in vain. Meanwhile, the West can only shake its head, marveling at how easily the line between tyranny and benevolence can be blurred by those desperate, to rewrite history in their favor. And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.